Our protagonist is called the weakest weapon. His abilities are merely E rank. He's the kind of person who gets hospitalized after using even the lowest level portals. He's considered one of the most useless hunters. However, any dungeon he participates in is guaranteed to be safe. In the past 2.5 years, the money he saved was only enough to buy this small, low magic knife. The strategy guides, the portals, they're all for defeating monsters and getting the magic crystals inside them. Reselling the materials obtained this way is how hunters make a living. As the weakest hunter, he doesn't always get magic crystals. Just as he was feeling pleased with himself for getting his first crystal, a goblin suddenly attacked him. He narrowly avoided a fatal blow. He barely dodged the attack, tumbling and rolling. The male protagonist steadied himself. He fiercely stabbed at the goblin wolf that had attacked him. Unexpectedly, his magic knife shattered. The next second, the goblin wolf plunged its long knife into the male protagonist's waist. Seeing this, the members of the strategy team rushed forward. One blow killed the goblin. This proves just how useless the main character is. Seeing that the main character wasn't fatally wounded, the man returned to the front lines. Although the main character's wound was bleeding profusely, it wasn't a problem for Jui, the B-class healer. The main character was very frustrated. He watched the hunters shine before him. He could easily defeat the difficult-to-kill monster, while the male lead could only lie on the ground and be cared for. With Elder Song's final blow, the dungeon boss was successfully defeated. Everyone cheered joyfully, but only Juhi, who was close to the male lead, was unhappy. She asked the male lead if he was clinging to his hunter job to prove himself. If this continues, he'll get seriously hurt one day. It's not just his stomach, his whole body is suffering this kind of damage. She's really worried. What if one day he's not there and no one can treat him? What if he dies in the dungeon? Although the male lead desperately tries to conquer only a small amount of loot, it's not worth it. But he had his reasons for doing so. Just then, the team discovered a seemingly endless underground passage. Could it be a double dungeon? After all, they've already defeated the boss, but the dungeon hasn't closed. This means there might be more loot inside. Seeing this, Lao Song said that in this situation, they needed to report to the Hunters Association. He intended to stop there, but some members felt this was a good opportunity. Otherwise, they would hand over their hard-earned spoils. It's a D-rank dungeon, and it should be easy for them. After all, the spoils from this trip were too little. Lao Song also understood everyone's desire to make money, but the unknown is the most dangerous. If you really want to continue, then let's decide by vote. After everyone's vote, the final result was 6 votes in favor and 6 votes against. The deciding vote rests with the male lead. Hearing this, the male lead was very conflicted inwardly. He clearly understood how dangerous the dungeon was, but his father's whereabouts remain unknown. He's the only one in the family who earns money. He not only has to cover his mother's medical expenses, but also his younger sister's college tuition. He desperately needs money. He resolutely cast his decisive vote, but he didn't know this decision would change his destiny. Meanwhile, below the Hunters Guild building, the rampant motorcycle thief snatches pedestrians' bags in broad daylight. That profile is simply stunning. The girl in front of us is named Che Hien. She is one of the country's few S-class hunters. Beautiful and capable, she's always surrounded by a crowd of fans whenever she appears. She truly deserves the title of S-class hunter. Meanwhile, everyone arrived at the boss's door. Faced with such a rare boss, some also had second thoughts. But faced with the temptation of a rare double dungeon, the members didn't want to miss this opportunity. With the door opening, a vast temple came into view. Statues surrounded the temple. No monsters were found. The statues seem very old. The statue before the protagonist is the largest here. Then, Lao Song discovers what seems to be a magic circle on the ground, and stone tablets inscribed with ancient characters. The commandments of the Keller Deepa Temple. Worship the god, praise the god, and prove your faith. Suddenly, Juhi tugged at the male lead's sleeve. Her expression was full of fear. It was because she noticed the giant statues I moved slightly. It seemed to be watching them. Accompanied by a sudden tremor, the boss's entrance suddenly closed. Were they going to be trapped in the dungeon? Seeing this, a strong man blamed them. He didn't want to come originally. It's because he underestimated the dungeon that it became like this. Facing this unknown situation, he prioritizes survival. He'll leave the loot to other all. At this moment, everyone broke out in a cold sweat. Little did they know, the last sentence on the stone tablet. Those who do not follow the rules will not be able to leave this place alive. Everyone was terrified by the situation before them. Were they really going to challenge such a powerful statue? Even the D-rank strongman was instantly killed. They simply couldn't leave here alive. The statue guarded the entrance like a grim reaper. The male protagonist was filled with fear. Isn't this a D-rank dungeon? Why would a monster of this level appear here? When he turned around, he met the gaze of the cold, sharp statue. He, who had experienced countless life or death situations, immediately sensed something was wrong. As everyone mistakenly entered the temple, they discovered a stone tablet inside. Harold feared the temple's precepts, the first of which was worship the god. Secondly, praise the god. Thirdly, prove your faith. Before they understood what that meant, the eerie stone statues behind them suddenly fired a powerful laser beam at everyone. Although a small number of people survived thanks to the male lead's warning, Those who didn't react had their ashes scattered. Although Captain Song reacted, he sacrificed an arm. At this moment, the male lead recalled that the god mentioned on the stele must be the stone statue before him. Just as the male lead was about to analyze the 3 precepts, the hunter beside him couldn't take it anymore. He had finally signed a contract with a large guild, and he didn't want to lose his life here. He was very confident in his speed. He could definitely have rushed out before it attacked. However, before he could even run 2.5 meters, a laser shot from the statue's eyes. Compared to his prided speed, only a pair of jade feet remained. The male lead was bewildered. The stone statue clearly had the ability to eliminate them in one go. Why haven't they made a move yet? It's as if they're deliberately toying with them. Suddenly, the male lead also remembered the text at the bottom of the precepts. Those who do not abide by the precepts will not be able to leave the temple alive. And the first precept is to worship God. Then that proves it's not the statues that are not acting, but it has its own set of rules within the temple. Then the male lead slowly stood up, intending to test the statue's reaction. When his eyes flashed, the male lead finally understood the meaning of the first commandment. Seeing this, the male lead quickly lowered his head, and then looked at the statue. He noticed the laser that was about to fire retract. Seeing this, the male lead told everyone to kneel before the statue. According to the rules of the precepts, as long as their heads were below a certain height, it wouldn't attack. This is the meaning of the first precept, worship the god. Hearing this, everyone knelt before the statue. However, just as everyone knelt down, the statue suddenly changed. Although the statue showed a serene expression, it seemed to have stopped moving. Seeing this, Xiaopang boldly stood up. Seeing that the statue showed no sign of attack, it proved that the first commandment, worshipping the god, had been passed. But before they could breathe a sigh of relief, the stone statues that had been sitting down suddenly stood up. Clearly, it wasn't over. Seeing the stone statues walking towards them, the male lead immediately remembered the second commandment, praise the gods. But he wasn't sure how to praise them. At that moment, the man beside him confidently said, I've studied traditional folklore for 2.5 years. Praising gods comes easily to her. If nothing unexpected happens, then something unexpected will happen. It's just that he used the words of praise for other gods to praise him, revealing his true nature. He was then crushed flat by the statue. Seeing this, everyone fled. Little Fatty thought he'd be safe if he ran far away, but unexpectedly, he died on the spot the next second. The male lead, witnessing this scene, seemed to have an idea. The surrounding stone statues all held different weapons. However, some stone statues held musical instruments. Seeing this, the male lead immediately called for everyone to run to the musical instrument statues. When Captain Song ran to a musical instrument statue, the statue suddenly emitted the sound of music. This proved that those standing under the musical instrument statues would not be attacked. However, when the male lead arrived at the base of the statue, he didn't start playing. He immediately understood that 2 people couldn't stand together below the statue. He left Juhi where she was, while he searched for another statue. But his isolation was quickly noticed, accompanied by a heavy footfall. At the critical moment, the male lead quickly threw himself under the statue. Little did he know, in his panic, he got the location wrong. The statue behind him wasn't holding a musical instrument. The moment the giant shield fell, the male lead luckily escaped. Immediately after, a giant jade foot behind him was about to fall. But he didn't give up. He was only a step away from the statue in front of him. At the very last moment before the giant foot landed, the male lead luckily reached the bottom of the statue. But he also paid the price of a leg. Seeing the statue sit back down, Juhi quickly ran over and tried her best to treat the male lead. But the injury was too severe, and she only managed to stop the bleeding after exhausting her magic. However, at that moment, the statue slowly raised its arm. An altar suddenly appeared in the center of the temple. And the third commandment is to prove your faith. In the mythological world, the appearance of an altar represents the need to offer sacrifices to the gods. Offerings, or even living sacrifices, are placed upon it. Hearing this, the hunter drew his sword, pointing it at Captain Song. In his eyes, all of this was due to his misjudgment. Then this is when he needs to take responsibility. Seeing this, Captain Song offered no resistance. When he stood alone on the altar, a flame ignited behind him. Seeing this, the male lead was a little puzzled. This meant the altar didn't require a human sacrifice. He asked a nearby hunter to help him go and take a look. The moment the 3 stepped onto the altar, 3 flames ignited behind them. Seeing this, the male lead also let the others come inside. The flames surrounding the altar seemed to correspond to the number of people. Only when all were lit did they understand what the next step was. As all the flames rose, a bolt of lightning shot out from the center of the altar. A ring of blue flames rose on the outermost edge. At that moment, the tightly closed door slowly opened. But everyone dared not move, afraid it was another trap. As the blue flames disappeared, the surrounding stone statues seemed to be activated, slowly walking towards them. Everyone panicked immediately, but only the male lead noticed. When he makes eye contact with the statues, they will stop. Seeing this, the male lead immediately had everyone make eye contact with the statues. They would approach if they looked away. It sounds simple, but making eye contact with such terrifying statues, he broke into a cold sweat in an instant. Unable to bear the pressure, he abandoned the male lead and ran away. After he left, a portion of the altar's flames also disappeared. The gate also closed slightly, but he escaped safely. At this moment, everyone had their own thoughts, but the male lead felt it wasn't that simple. The blue flames would disappear with time, and once someone left the altar, then the red flames will disappear. When he recalls the 3 precepts, worship God, praise God, and prove your faith, then what's behind the door must be a trap. It lets those in terror and crisis see a false hope, testing their faith in this way. Someone ran out. Even the hunter who had been supporting the male lead couldn't help but rush towards the exit. Seeing this, the male lead shouted at everyone to not act rashly, saying that if anyone left his sight, blind spots would appear. He insisted that they just keep their eyes on the statue and stay put. Once the blue flame countdown ended, everyone should be able to escape safely. But the others felt, it's also possible that after the flames disappear, we'll be trapped here forever. Thank you very much, male lead. You, the weakest among us, let us out of this predicament. But his family is waiting for him to return. He doesn't want to lose his life here. As soon as he finished speaking, the hunter ran out. At this moment, the male lead also completely despaired. Before the flames are completely extinguished, the stone statue will arrive at the altar first. Seeing this, Captain Song also said, it seems the altar's door won't close as long as someone remains there. A bright future should be left to you young people. Let Juhi lead the male lead away from here. He remained where he was. But unexpectedly, Juhi's legs went weak from overusing magic. She was completely unable to carry the male lead out of the door. Seeing this, the male lead asked Captain Song to take Juhi out. Of course, Juhi was reluctant, but Captain Song knocked her unconscious with a hand chop. If they waited any longer, all 3 of them would die there, accompanied by the extinguishing of 2 flames. Captain Song and Jushi also left the temple. The male lead also breathed a sigh of relief after watching Jushi leave. Although he was left alone, he didn't give up. He immediately picked up the long sword nearby, his eyes flashing with determination. Even if he died, he would take one of the stone statues down with him. Imagining it is wonderful. But faced with such a disparity in strength against these statues, the male lead is no match for them. In a flash, he was beaten black and blue. He couldn't help but recall his time as a hunter. As the weakest E-rank hunter, he was ridiculed everywhere he went. Every mission required him to risk his life just to survive. He also wanted to become as strong as an S-class hunter. But no matter how hard he tried, he knew deep down it was impossible. Remembering his sick mother and his sister in school, he couldn't help but feel ridiculous. He had a family waiting for him to come home. He was the one who found a way, but it was they who lived on. He wanted to live too. And he said it was fortunate that only he died. What a clown. The latest episode of I Alone Level Up is explosive. The male lead passed the temple's trials, showing the gods the courage of a weakling. In the final 0.02 seconds of his life, he obtained the key to becoming the Shadow Monarch. The moment he woke up, he found himself seemingly in a hospital. He looked at his arm, which should have been severed, and his severed leg. Even the stab wound in his chest was completely unharmed. It was as if it had all been a dream. Just then, the door opened. It was the section chief of the Hunter Association's inspection department, in charge of investigating the double dungeon incident. Only 6 members of the raid team survived. Captain Song lost an arm. Juhi suffered severe psychological trauma. Although the hunter profession inherently involves risk, such heavy casualties are extremely rare. And for some reason, when they received reports of survivors, he and the guild leader of Zihu arrived at the scene. They found the male lead alone deep in the cave. According to survivor accounts, no gate or temple statues were found. If it weren't for the survivors' statements and the lack of any bodies at the scene, he would have strongly suspected the male lead. He would have asked him if he had experienced a second awakening. Normally, once a hunter awakens their abilities, they will be unable to change their rank for the rest of their lives. However, a very small number of hunters experience a second awakening, transcending their limits, and rising to become A-rank or even S-rank hunters. He then took out a magic detector, which can detect the amount of magic power one possesses. If the survivor's words are true, there really are monsters in the temple that can instantly kill people. A low-level hunter like the male lead couldn't possibly survive. Yet, the magical beasts in those temples vanished without a trace. It's impossible without the abilities of an S-class hunter. That's why we suspect the male lead experienced a second awakening. But what they completely didn't expect was that the hunter before them only had 10 mana points. He didn't even tell the male lead the result before leaving the room. Even the lowest level E-class hunters have at least 70 mana points. Even a different dog might be better than him. Now the dungeon has disappeared, making further investigation impossible. They can't figure out how he survived. Little did they know, they completely missed the system panel in front of the male lead. Could it be that only he can see this thing? At this time, an unread email popped up in the window. When he opened it with his mind, it notified him that he had become a player with daily quests, preparing to become stronger. This system will assist the player's growth. Players who do not follow this system's instructions will suffer corresponding penalties. Daily tasks have begun. Saitama's training plan running. Push-ups, sit-ups, warning. The daily quest includes a 10 kilometers run. Failure will result in punishment. Seeing this, the male protagonist was also confused. He's a patient. Where would he have the energy for this? Little did he know, after 12 o'clock midnight, a system pop-up automatically appeared. The daily quest, preparation for becoming stronger, is incomplete. He will be transferred to the punishment zone. With a violent shake, the male lead was instantly thrown to the ground. When he opened his eyes again, the ground had become sand. What met his eyes was a boundless desert. Before he could react, a writhing sound suddenly came from behind him. When he looked back, a huge, murderous gaze was fixed on him. Dazed, the system notified him again. Penalty task, survival. Survive 4 hours in the mouth of a desert centipede. Seeing this, the male lead ran for his life. At this moment, he finally understood what the system's punishment was. Surviving in the mouth of a centipede was already extremely difficult. However, desert creatures kept appearing around him. They undoubtedly wanted to kill him. Accompanied by a system notification, survival punishment mission completed. Seeing this, the male lead could no longer hold on and fainted. 2.5 days later, he gradually understood a few things. First, the system in front of him was not his hallucination. After completing daily tasks, he'll be rewarded with 3 ability points and a random chest. Points, you can allocate the acquired ability points to the abilities you want to improve. As your ability points increase, your strength will also increase. The random chest will give you various items. But today, he unexpectedly got a key. It's because these past few days, the chests have only given him useless things like pens and band-aids. System prompt. Use the available key to move to the time-limited dungeon. Please use it at exit 3 of the metro station. Although the male lead was a little confused, following the procedure, it might be a task to become stronger. After experiencing what happened before, he still felt some fear of the dungeon. He recalls his mother, bedridden since the appearance of the portal. She developed an extremely rare form of drowning disease. Rumor has it that it was caused by prolonged exposure to magic. With current medical technology, doctors can only maintain her life. This requires expensive medical fees every month, so he made up his mind. I've made thorough preparations to once again enter the dungeon. I've also replaced the broken knife with a new one. To cover his mother's medical expenses and his sister's tuition, he resolutely entered the dungeon once again. With the opening of the portal, though he felt a little uneasy inside, he was very confident in his ability to escape. If he encountered any danger, he would turn and run immediately. However, unexpectedly, upon entering the real dungeon, the portal behind him instantly shut. His only escape route was sealed. When he noticed that passers-by could safely pass through the barrier, he realized this seemed to be a completely different, otherworldly space, similar to the concept of a red portal. Just then, a system notification appeared. The player will be unable to leave the dungeon. Please defeat the boss or use a return stone. If I don't defeat BOSS, I can't leave. I can't even beat an E-rank monster, and I have to solo the dungeon right away. Since I can't leave, I'll just have to grit my teeth and do it. Just then, 3 goblins suddenly dropped from the ceiling. The male lead was stunned. Before, he almost lost his life fighting just one. Now he has to deal with 3 at once. It's too much to ask. When he barely dodged the first goblin's attack, the second goblin followed closely behind. He is somewhat relieved that he completed his daily tasks and leveled up these past few days. If this happened before, he would have been defeated in 2.5 seconds. He never thought he could single-handedly defeat monsters. It seems he really has gotten stronger. Scarlet Eye suddenly appeared from the darkness. In an instant, it appeared behind the male lead. It was rapidly attacking him. Seeing this, the male protagonist tried to block it with his knife, but unexpectedly, it was crushed in an instant. Steel-tooth wolf. It possesses incredibly sharp teeth. This goblin is stronger than the ones he encountered earlier. He was just feeling smug a moment ago. Now his legs are shaking uncontrollably. It feels just like it did in the temple before. Fear in the face of a powerful creature. However, he didn't know that fear was a psychological trauma left behind by the temple. Faced with the steel-tooth wolf's attack, he could only barely dodge. Now he is tackling the dungeon alone. There's no healer. If he get injured here, he is dead for sure. Just now, the male lead, having obtained the system, entered the dungeon alone. He originally went in with the determination to die fighting the steel-tooth wolves, but unexpectedly, completing system tasks these past few days has greatly increased his abilities. With just one punch, he sent steel-tooth wolf flying into the wall. At that moment, he finally understood. He was no longer the same. He was no longer considered the weakest human weapon. He also knew that although his strength had increased, with his current strength, he couldn't defeat Steel-Tooth Wolf unarmed. His attacks felt like scratching to Steel-Tooth Wolf. Without a team and without a healer, one person simply can't clear the dungeon. Going on like this, he'll be worn down and killed sooner or later. He doesn't have any extra weapons in his inventory either. Speaking of weapons, the male lead seemed to have thought of something. This weapon is the long sword that Old Man Jean left behind in the temple, though he is not sure why it's appeared in his system inventory. The system announced the kill of a Steel-Tooth Wolf. His level increased accordingly. The damage he had taken was restored to peak levels at that moment. He didn't have time to think. 2 more Steel-Tooth Wolves appeared before him, but now he had a weapon. and killing one steel-tooth wolf greatly boosted his confidence. He fiercely hacked at the steel-tooth wolf lunging at him. What he didn't expect was that his steel teeth were no mere decoration. The wolf clamped down hard on the male lead's long sword. The male lead, without hesitation, delivered a powerful whip kick to his body. Immediately afterward, he used both hands to forcefully sever his head. After all, this was a 3 million yuan weapon. If it got damaged, he'd be heartbroken. Seeing his brother killed like that, the other wolf didn't even think about revenge, just fled in disgrace. Seeing this, the male lead finally breathed a sigh of relief. He hadn't expected monsters to appear continuously as soon as he entered the dungeon. Then he saw a system notification about a level up. Even the wounds he just sustained healed. After leveling up, his strength, agility, perception, stamina, and intelligence all increased by 1 point. Completing daily quests only rewarded 3 points. If he does that, leveling up through battles will increase his strength much faster. Currently, his highest stat is strength. It's only 32 points, but his body feels noticeably lighter. Then he checked the Steel Fang wolves' corpses. They didn't seem to have any magic stones. Along with a system prompt, obtained the item, Lakin's toothpaste. This made him feel as if he were being controlled by a game-like system. What he obtained in the dungeon wasn't a magic stone, but material items. He then discovered that the system had a shop. Unfortunately, a message indicated that his level was insufficient to open it. But he could sell the materials obtained from the dungeon to the system shop. The exchange rate was based on the dungeon level. This was most likely an E-rank dungeon. 20 gold coins probably won't be much. He also recalled the dungeon's rules. He needs to obtain a return stone to leave, or defeat the boss to clear the dungeon and leave. He didn't have much hope originally, but if he level up to a certain point, maybe he'll still have a chance to defeat the boss. However, he might also die along the way. No sooner had he spoken, the steel-tooth wolf that had run away earlier, seemingly dishonorable, returned with a pack of brothers to seek revenge on the male lead. Facing the menacing steel-tooth wolf, the male lead didn't feel the same fear he had initially. He had already died once. Compared to the oppressive aura emanating from the statues in the temple, he suddenly felt the steel-tooth wolf was nothing to be afraid of. He won't die so easily again, and he hoped they can hold out a little longer. If he killed them instantly, he'll feel a little embarrassed. So, the steel-tooth wolves were completely annihilated. His long sword is also full of cracks. He understands that even the most expensive weapons will eventually break down one day. With the system prompt, obtained the title Hidden Wolf Slayer. All abilities increased by 40% when fighting beast-type monsters. Obtained item, Wolf Fang, 2 old short swords in traveler's attire. Even a return scroll, which he thought was very rare, dropped. With this, he can safely leave the dungeon now. But after leaving, this place might disappear without a trace, like a game event. Since his safety is now secured, he doesn't want to miss this opportunity to become stronger so easily. With continuous fighting in the dungeon, every time he level up, battles with monsters become easier and easier. He has defeated a Black Shadow Raisin. He has also gradually grasped a pattern. The system displays the color of a monster's name according to its strength. White indicates it's weaker. Orange means its strength is comparable. Red means it's stronger. The steel-tooth wolf, which was initially red named, is now only white named. This means its strength has increased significantly. Even so, it seems he can't defeat the boss below with his current strength. His heightened perception allowed him to clearly sense the terrifying aura emanating from the boss below. His level 15 available ability seemed to have reached its limit here. Continuing the fight, his weapon would likely not be able to withstand it. But despite that, the male lead still intended to challenge the boss. He then arrived at the flooded subway passage. He hadn't yet had time to check his surroundings. The water surged. A figure charged towards the male lead at incredible speed. He was knocked away before he could react. A gigantic green snake appeared before him. He felt incredibly small in its presence. Dungeon boss, King of the Swamp, Blue Venom Fanged Kasaka. He saw the orange name before him. Clearly, it's a boss of comparable strength, but its body is covered in hard scales. With this damaged sword, he is no match for it. Since he is already here, he might as well see just how great the difference in strength is. As it lunged at him with its gaping maw, he dodged sideways, using his long sword to stab at the green snake's body. Sparks flew from its hard scales. He couldn't break through the green snake's defenses at all. Suddenly, the green snake whipped its head around and attacked him. Seeing this, the male lead quickly dodged the attack. But facing the relentlessly pursuing green snake, he couldn't escape. He barely blocked the attack, but was sent tumbling across the ground. Before he could regain his footing, the green snake's tail came sweeping towards him. A brief exchange and the male lead was utterly defeated. At this moment, the male lead fell into a flashback, gathering strength. What is humanity's weakest weapon? Ultimately, it's weakness that makes people look down on you. As long as you become strong enough, possessing overwhelming power, that would allow you to remain undefeated. The weak are powerless before the strong. They can only be consumed by terror, unable to resist. Even if they are clever, in the end, their weakness will lead to their abandonment. Before the strong, the weak have no voice. He has died once. He never wants to experience being controlled by the strong again. He even laughs at his own past gentleness. He needs to become stronger. Strong enough to make everyone fear him. That's why he resolutely entered the dungeon alone. Burning to explode. System notification. Level up. King of the Swamp, Blue Venom Fanged Kasaka, has been slain. Obtain the weapon Caesar card's Fong. Attacks have a chance to paralyze the enemy. It can even inflict bleeding. Enemies in a bleeding state lose 1% of their health per second. What's even more absurd is Caesar card's Venom, after use, reduces physical damage by 20%, muscle damage and strength by 35%. System prompt, boss defeated. The dungeon interior will revert to its original state. With a flash of light, the surroundings became incredibly bright. Dragging his weary body, he exited the subway station. The street was deserted. A soldier suddenly appeared beside him. Due to the portal malfunctioning, dungeon monsters have run into the streets and are wreaking havoc. He looked at the weapon in the male lead's hand. After learning that he was also a hunter, he immediately led him to the scene. But now the monsters have almost all been eliminated. Only one big one remains. As the male protagonist's level increased, his perception also greatly improved. He clearly sensed the boss's presence nearby. The huge stone giant was wreaking havoc on the streets. Bystanders nearby were taking photos and posting them on their moments with confidence. This was simply because a hunter team was holding it off. But unfortunately, the team members were a temporary group. They had absolutely no coordination. Not only was the team's average level low, the highest ranking one is a D-class tank. Unable to deliver a fatal blow to the monster, they're stuck in a prolonged battle. Unbeknownst to them, Juhi is also in this team. But the terrifying experience from before remains etched in her mind. Every time she closes her eyes, she recalls that terrifying smile. Seeing this, the male protagonist prepares to lend them a hand. The boss before them is merely a D-class. It seems weaker than the green snake he encountered earlier. One hit shattered the boss's defense. Seeing this, everyone instantly focused their fire on the boss. The boss, whose defenses were broken, didn't last long and fell in the melee. However, the tank knew very well that they were simply incapable of breaking the boss's defense with their own strength. He looked at the dropped weapon and quickly asked the soldiers who had left it there. Just 2.5 hours ago, the male lead, who persevered in completing his daily tasks, has now undergone a significant change in demeanor. He's not only grown taller again, but his whole body is now filled with explosive muscle. After clearing the time-limited dungeon, he reached level 18 and gained 12 ability points. He immediately allocated them all to strength and agility. Although strength can increase damage, it's meaningless if you can't hit the target. He's much stronger now and can easily make money, but he's still an E-rank hunter. He can't access higher-level portals to make more money. If he goes back to the Hunters Association for re-evaluation, a higher rank would allow him access to better portals. But he quickly dismissed that idea, because people who have a second awakening are extremely rare. What's more, he's a hunter who grows stronger with each level increase. It might cause unnecessary trouble later. It's best to keep a low profile until he fully masters his power. At that moment, the male lead received an invitation notification, so he ran directly to his destination. He also completed his daily 10-kilometer run. At this time, members of the strategy team approached the male lead. It just so happens that one of the raiders' teams is short of someone to make up the numbers. The team leader's name is Huang Dongshi. They needed a certain number of people to tackle the C-class portal, so they invited the male lead to make up the numbers. After all, an E-class hunter isn't much of a fighting force. Therefore, he wouldn't share in the spoils, but in return, he would receive a fee of 2 million. The main fighting force of the raid team consisted of 4 C-class hunters and 2 D-class hunters. The male lead was mainly responsible for carrying their luggage, mainly food, equipment, and medical supplies. Hearing this, the male lead asked, "Do you plan to tackle this without a healer?" However, faced with the explanation that it's difficult to recruit a healer for a private attack team, the male lead didn't ask further, but the lack of a healer gave him a feeling of unease. During the conversation, the male lead signed the waiver. Whatever happens in the dungeon, neither party may hold the other accountable. Then, a voice came from the side. His name is Ryu Jinho, a D-rank hunter. He was also brought in to make up the numbers. However, upon seeing his equipment, everyone was stunned. A D-rank hunter wearing high-end gear from head to toe? Damn, is this some rich kid experiencing life? When he was about to enter the portal, he found the entrance incredibly large. If the association hadn't confirmed it twice before giving it a C-rank evaluation, they would have thought it was a B-rank portal. After all, the size of a portal has no relation to its rank. The rank is determined by detecting the magical fluctuations emanating from inside. If it's a B rank or higher dungeon, then it needs to be handled by a large guild. They sensed something was wrong the moment they stepped inside. Not only were there no monsters, but it was pitch black inside. Normally, the interior of a dungeon should have nightlight stones. They reached the depths without any obstruction. They didn't find a single monster along the way. Jinho was a little curious. Could there be dungeons without monsters? At this time, the male lead closed his eyes and sensed his surroundings. He heard footsteps nearby. It wasn't that there were no monsters, they just hadn't appeared yet. The next second, the raiding party immediately entered combat mode. At this moment, the male lead also understood that the monsters, acting collectively in the darkness, were creatures that would swarm towards any light. It must be an insect-type monster. These monsters are incredibly disgusting. Whenever they appear, they come in swarms. If they're ants, we're in trouble. There are so many holes, it's impossible to know where they'll attack from. The moment the male lead gave the warning, the mage instantly launched an attack upwards, disrupting their ambush. Seeing this, Huang Dongshi immediately used the provoke skill, drawing all the surrounding ants' hatred onto himself, buying time for the team's output. Although the team lacks a healer, their coordination is impeccable. Seeing their excellent teamwork, the male lead was once again puzzled. He wondered if it was because they hadn't found a healer yet. Their fighting style was quite brutal. And although Jinho was entering a sea-level dungeon for the first time, his lavish equipment made up for his lack of skill. Faced with the sudden attack, everyone acted in an orderly manner, but deep down, there was a feeling of impatience. Soon, the ant swarm was completely wiped out. Huang Dongshi stepped forward to thank the male lead for the warning. If they had discovered it any later, it wouldn't have been so easy. He was also curious how he knew the monster would appear above. Seeing this, the male lead said it was just intuition. Before he could ask further, the members seemed to have discovered something. It was because some of the ants had strangely unusual wounds. They didn't look like the sword wounds and magical burns they inflicted. There were quite a few that looked like they had been bitten to death. It seemed like a fierce battle between magical beasts fighting over territory. That would prove there's a more powerful magical beast here that eats ants. At this time, the male lead suddenly asked Jinho, "Your sword and shield must be very expensive." Jinho explained that it was because it was his first mission. His father had spent a lot of money buying high-end goods. Hearing this, the male lead reminded him, although it's hard to explain now, you should be more careful. Following this, everyone explored the dungeon again. Along the way, they didn't encounter any monster attacks. Faced with the high reward for not having to fight, the male lead always felt something was amiss. A battle-hardened team, yet without a single healer. He still needed to find someone to fill the gap. During this exploration, although he hadn't encountered any danger, he kept running into a bunch of half-dead ants along the way. It seemed the boss must be somewhere around here. With the wizard illuminating the cave ahead, intricate spiderwebs came into view. Barring any surprises, the boss room is likely ahead. And when they walked in, they all became instantly excited. A large expanse of mana stones appeared before them. A rough estimate puts their value at least 1 billion. Even splitting it 7 ways, everyone would get over 100 million. Seeing this, Jinho asked the male lead to take a look at the contract they signed earlier. He happened to know a bit about law. He then asked Huang Dongshi, the contract only specifies the ownership of the spoils of war, and the mana stone doesn't count as spoils of war, so the male lead should get a share. Seeing this, Huang Dongshi readily agreed to give him a share. But right now, the most important thing is the boss in the dungeon. If they kill the boss, the portal will close. So they need to get the mana stones out before they kill the boss. Luckily, the boss is sleeping. This is the best mining opportunity for now. But since their tools are still in the vehicle, they didn't bring them. So let 2 people stay here while the others go back for the tools. The boss just ate and is sleeping now, so we don't need to worry. As long as they aren't stimulated, there won't be any problems for a short time. Hearing this, the male lead sensed something was wrong. According to regulations, conquering a sea-level dungeon requires at least 8 people. Subtracting him and Jinho's team, there are only 6 people. However, they had previously said they'd always managed like this. That proves they frequently conquer sea-level dungeons. Logically, they shouldn't need to constantly look for extra people. However, after Huang Dongshi went out, he revealed his true colors. Have the team's mage blow up the boss's exit. At this moment, Jinho understood. It seemed that the 2 of them had been betrayed by the team. Seeing this scene, the male lead's suspicions were confirmed. Lao Song had once told him, being a hunter is a very dangerous job. Accidents happen all the time. Plus, there are no surveillance cameras in the dungeon. Even if something unexpected happens, there will be no witnesses. So some hunters emerge. They use the weak as bait to lure the enemy. They are specifically used as cannon fodder. Jinho feels very guilty. He thinks the other party wanted to kill them for those mana stones. He blames himself for talking too much about the contract and getting him into trouble. The male lead explains to him, actually, no matter how the situation develops, as long as we dare to make a move, they will immediately strike us down. Our fate was sealed the moment we entered the dungeon. It's useless to think about it now. The important thing now is the awakened boss. The exit is blocked, and we can't escape. Cheng Xiaoyu and the other person have been abandoned by the team and are being used as cannon fodder to feed the boss. Normally, to defeat a C-class boss alone, at least a B-class or higher hunter is needed. The male lead obviously understands this. Even after his second awakening and level increase, he's still very weak. He did defeat a D-class boss alone in the time-limited dungeon before, but that's without a doubt. The boss before him is even stronger. But for some reason, facing such a powerful boss, he doesn't seem to feel that frustrating pressure. His level has reached 18, plus the ability points gained from daily quests. My own attributes have greatly improved. He constantly dodged the spider's attacks, seizing opportunities to weaken its combat power. But he didn't expect the boss's skin to be so incredibly hard. His attacks couldn't even break its defense. On the contrary, if he took a hit from the boss, he might be seriously injured, even if he didn't die. Seeing this, he attacked the boss again, trying to find its weak point. However, this exaggerated fighting style stunned Jinho. An E-rank hunter couldn't possibly make such movements. Then he started imagining various scenarios. Imagine the male lead as an illegal immigrant. A very small number of people can deliberately control their magic to obtain the title of low-level hunter. They are all a group of psychopathic killers who enjoy killing. They hide their strength for the thrill of killing. If the male lead knew that in just 2.5 minutes, he had become a psychopathic killer, he'd really be shitting bricks. In the brief clash, the male lead was unable to inflict any damage on the boss. My fatigue level has already reached 57 points. If it continues to rise, it will cause a significant drop in speed. So I have to solve this before that happens. My weapon can inflict paralysis and bleeding on the attacked target. As long as I hit the boss's weak point, then my chances of winning will greatly increase. Seeing this, the male lead charged towards the boss again, but he didn't expect a thick glob of phlegm to be sprayed at him. If he hadn't dodged quickly, he might have been melted like the ground. The hard skin and high concentration of strong acid. It's just unreasonable, boss. If this continues, the boss will definitely wear him down. So he immediately activated the newly learned skill, Swift Run. It increases his speed by 30%. He planned to rush to the boss and fight head-on. Although the male lead activated Sprint, his speed was extremely fast, but his stamina consumption increased accordingly. When he launched another attack, his fatigue level reached 70 points. His speed dropped drastically in an instant. The boss seized the opportunity and knocked him away violently. Facing the boss's fatal blow, his injured and exhausted body was completely immobile. Just in the nick of time, he remembered the system's status recovery. The moment the attack landed, he used it to avoid the fatal blow. As the male lead, restored to full health, seized the moment of boss's recovery animation, he leaped directly onto boss's head. He plunged his weapon deep. The moment the defense broke, bleeding and paralysis debuffs appeared simultaneously. System notification: the dungeon master has been killed. Level up. The male lead, having survived the ordeal, felt incredibly fortunate. He was glad he had saved the rewards from completing each objective. Otherwise, this time he would have been in serious trouble. He then proceeded to extract the crystal from the boss's body. Having defeated a C-class boss for the first time, he had no idea how much it would sell for. Just then, Jinho walked over, trembling. Worried that the male lead would kill him after discovering his identity, he quickly swore brotherhood, offering him water, and letting him rest while he did all the hard labor. Suddenly, a voice rang out. I didn't expect the two of them not only survived, but also killed the boss. A little suspicious was this boss all show and no go? But relying on Jinho's equipment, worth hundreds of millions, it's also possible to kill him beyond one's level. Before this, he also investigated Jinho's equipment. He discovered that he was actually the son of the chairman of the Lusian Construction Company, so he decided to give him a chance. I'm sure you've already figured out. Our method is to kill those useless cannon fodder. Then we can keep the spoils of war for ourselves. Now, only you can kill the male lead. Let him live if he becomes our accomplice. Though that's what he said. Actually, Huang Dongshi is just worried that Jinho's equipment has special effects. If they choose not to agree, he doesn't mind sending both of them on your way. Anyway, no one will know what happens in the dungeon. Hearing this, Jinho gripped his weapon and walked towards the male lead. He's not an ungrateful guy. If it weren't for the male lead, he might have already died at the hands of boss. Seeing this, Huang Dongshi also understood his choice. Although it's a bit of a pity, let's kill the weakest, the male lead, first. Suddenly, the system panel automatically popped up. Emergency mission triggered. Eliminate the 6 enemies before you. Before he could question it, an attack slammed into him. The male lead, caught off guard, was instantly buried under a pile of rocks. In that instant, he couldn't help but recall. Hadn't he experienced something similar just recently? In this place of survival of the fittest, violence, deception, and betrayal are rife. His newfound strength made him complacent. He almost forgot what humanity was. As he lay dying, the system reminded him again. If he didn't follow the system's prompt to kill the enemy, then the player's heart would also stop beating. The male lead didn't understand. Why would the system force him to kill? Could it be that he would be very troubled if I died? Or does the system needs me to be incredibly powerful? So, since the system is using me and I'm also using the system to become stronger, those who kill will be killed. In the dungeon, the weak will have everything taken from them. So, that means you've all prepared yourselves mentally for this, right? Seeing this, the man walked up to the male lead. A mere rank hunter dares to be so arrogant. It's simply laughable. However, the words had barely left his mouth when the man's head was coldly chopped off by the male lead. He probably wouldn't believe it until his death, although he killed him according to the system's instructions. But this was also the male lead's first time killing someone. If he hadn't acted, then he would have been the one to die, since there was no turning back. Then, Huang Dongshi couldn't believe it. In just a moment, all his teammates were killed. He never imagined the male lead were hiding your strength all along. He shouted in anger. Even if you defeated a C-rank boss, you still couldn't defeat me. With the enhanced skill activated, his body became as hard as steel. After the male lead fought the boss and 5 hunters, it's impossible for him to still be full of energy. Based on observation, the male lead relies on speed and the special skills of his short sword. As long as he can't pierce his own skin, then the advantage is mine. At this moment, Huang Dongshi finally understood how terrifyingly strong the male lead was. Just as he was about to beg for mercy, the male lead interrupted him. From the moment I entered the dungeon, you've mistaken me for a target to be killed 3 times. Do you think I'll let you go? There's a saying that's quite true. No one will ever know what happens in the dungeon. So, dungeon conquest complete. Survivors the male lead and Ryu Jinho. At the same time, the male lead gained 10 ability points in the new skill, Killing Intent. Active skill, Terror Effect. Reduces the target's ability values by 50%. The second day after clearing the C-rank dungeon, Jinho asked the male lead out again. He planned to establish an attack team. He wanted to invite the male lead to help, because his father wanted to establish a guild. But to become the guild master, you need a guild master's license. And the prerequisite for obtaining the license is that you must be a hunter who has participated in 20 surprise missions. Hearing this, the male lead seemed to understand. The dungeon's full of many rare treasures. Magic stones and mana stones are only a part of them. High-level monster bodies can also be used as materials for various equipment. It's safe to say that everything in the dungeon can be monetized. The reason he created the guild was to have the company's hunters conquer the dungeon. To establish a self-sufficient system, Jinho said his father planned to hire an S-rank hunter as guild master, and install his older brother as the vice guild master. But his brother isn't an awakened, so he can't be the guild master. So he wants to gain experience to get the guild master's license to compete with his brother, and said that if the male lead were to hide his strength and participate in the surprise mission, he would definitely need a partner, and that leading an E-class hunter team to conquer the dungeon would make it easier to persuade my father. Jinho was very clear that the male lead's strength was at least that of a B-class hunter, or even higher. Anyway, teaming up with other high-level hunters would only make betrayal more likely. Then, he handed the male lead a document. It was a document for a building plan to be the guild's office. Its current market value is approximately 300 billion. This is also the reward prepared for the male lead's task. The male lead fell silent for a moment. He could get 300 billion by completing the remaining 19 C-level tasks. He would have definitely agreed immediately before. Trade like this, then it won't be long before he becomes an S-class hunter. He might even surpass S-class. So, 300 billion is nothing. More importantly, without knowing the impact of this self-upgrade ability on himself, teaming up with others randomly is too risky. He also rejected Jinho's request. Hearing this, Jinho said stubbornly, "If you're willing to help me, then I will help you keep the secret for the rest of my life." But as soon as he finished speaking, what greeted Jinho, he realized he had spoken out of turn. Meanwhile, inside the M-Country Scavenger Guild, upon learning of his brother's death, Huang Dongshi immediately investigated and checked the information of the 2 survivors. He asked his secretary what the consequences would be if someone killed outside the country. The secretary replied that if a crime was committed in a country with an extradition treaty related to the crime, he would be punished according to the laws of that country. Depending on negotiations with relevant personnel, there might be room for a reduced sentence. Seeing this, Huang Dongshi said he would free up his schedule after completing his recent tasks. No matter the reason, the one who survives must be the murderer who killed his brother. Meanwhile, the male lead was jogging with his sister when the system unexpectedly exceeding the daily target number was also recorded. So, after 2.5 minutes of exercise, he found that the number stopped recording after doubling. Suddenly, squats. System notification, hidden task completed. Preparation to become stronger. Reward package distributed. A blessed random treasure chest. When the male lead opened it, he once again obtained a dungeon key. The key to Devil's Castle. This key opens the Devil's Castle. Difficulty, S rank. However, upon seeing the description, the male lead couldn't help but smile. Inside the Devil's Castle, one can obtain the Elixir of Life material. It uses powerful magic to cure all diseases. If he obtains this item, his mother's illness might be cured. In the blink of an eye, they arrive at the designated location of the dungeon. Then the difficulty of this dungeon would be at least S-class. If that's the case, then what awaits him inside would be the equivalent monsters from Jeju Island that even S-class hunters can't handle. Upon entering, what meets his eyes is a continuously burning ruin. With his current strength, attempting to conquer an S-class dungeon would be suicidal. Fortunately, a return stone was revealed earlier. If he is truly defeated, he can still escape the dungeon. Suddenly, a huge monster appeared before him. System stronger than him. Seeing this, the male lead immediately equipped the Hidden Wolf Slayer title. When fighting beast-type monsters, all abilities are boosted by. Seeing this, the male lead activated Killing Intent, reducing the target's ability values by 50%. But the target's resistance was too high, making it impossible to suppress him. The enraged Cerberus slammed into the male lead. Taking this opportunity, the male lead leaped forward and fiercely plunged his weapon into it. Although he instantly inflicted paralysis and bleeding debuffs, the Cerberus's resistance was too high, causing the effects to be quickly cancelled. Suddenly, a system prompt appeared. Cerberus used the Rage skill. For 3 minutes, all its abilities will be doubled. Seeing Cerberus, the male lead looked up. The Cerberus was instantly before him. The system kept popping up warnings. The male lead understood. He had already become a player. The system kept sending warnings to prevent him from dying. With his current health, but even 3 bottles only restore 300 HP. At most, he can only take 2 slaps. When checking his items, he found the venom dropped by the green snake earlier can reduce physical damage by 20%. He also recalled the tasks he completed in the double underground city. When he completed the hidden task, the courage of the weak, he received the Grand Sorcerer's blessing, health, and longevity. Not only could his wounds heal themselves, but he was also immune to poison and abnormal states. Since he is immune to the debuffs caused by toxins, there's still a tiny sliver of a chance for success. As the system detected harmful components, blessings of health and longevity were activated, as a bleeding effect. Seeing this, the male lead doesn't intend to miss this opportunity. If he misses, he will be the one who dies. And so, the male lead successfully kills the Hellhound Cerberus. System notification, level up. His status has been restored after leveling up. He obtained an item, a key to open the Demon Castle gate. He also got what he wanted most, the recipe and method for making Elixir of Life. 3 ingredients are needed to make it, and the ingredients can be obtained in the Demon Castle. Through the experience of this battle, the male lead also understood his current strength. Going in now means certain death, but it's what he needs to do now.